Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Olson from Donnabrook, Director of Donnabrook. I help organizations leverage next generation communications through the cloud service Ring Central and remote visual guidance through a platform called TechC. Today, I have Danny Berzotto with me of Structured Creative. Welcome, Danny.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. Danny, why don't you tell us a little bit about Structured Creative and your career that led to you establishing it? What's your background that led you to where you are today, and your focus on field service innovation?
Sure. So at Structured Creative, we're all about turning strategy into reality. And so my career that led me into that was, as a consultant, as an executive, working with organizations to do that. And the reason really setting up Structured Creative was because I saw that companies wanted more and more expertise, and that wasn't being provided by the big players in town. And me being with one of them really couldn't specialize. I need to be much more general. So establishing niche consultancy allows me to really deeply specialize in everything field service. And so I work on everything from, strategy around what products and services are we going to offer, what's the operating models we need to actually put in place to do that, what technology is going to enable that, all the way through to the org structure needed and actually making it happen. So when I say strategy to reality, it's that whole flow, but specific to field service.
Just for context, can you just identify the three common industries of field services that people might be able to identify with?
Yeah, sure. So telco, utilities, facilities management, and infrastructure services.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So there'd be those trucks running around fixing poles or installing our MBN to our home, for example, which I look forward to. Okay. So from your experience, what do you see as the biggest pain points in field services today?
Well, they do evolve over time and they do change, but there are a few common things. The overall problem and that really any field service business is trying to solve is get the right tech in the right place at the right time with the right skills, the right kit, the right equipment, all for the right cost. And so as you can see through that equation, there's many, many things that can go wrong. And so when you look at that, the big problems they're trying to solve is, well, do we actually need to go to site? Can we go to site less? Can we actually resolve things in a different way and a more cost-effective way? Because from a customer point of view, they just want to have their issue solved. They want to have their service active. They don't really care if someone's there to do it as long as it's happening and that they're not negatively impacted. So there's that part of it. So doing less, doing it more cost-effectively. And then the other side of things, which is becoming more and more prevalent, is doing it in an environmentally sensitive way. And so that's not just from sort of pure usage and the like, which is critical, but then also the circular economy. So how does everything like that flow back through?
There's a lot of moving parts they have to balance in that process. Do you think that organizations underestimate the cost of these inefficiencies and how they can add up?
So I think they've got a reasonable grasp of what the total cost is, but because they've been doing things for so long in a similar way, actually digging into that to understand how much of that is actually inefficiency that's addressable versus how much of that is not addressable is the part that real organizations struggle with. And when you sort of start to dig into that with them a little bit, you start to really sort of, I suppose, peel back that onion, if you will, and find, well, actually, these pieces, but we can address that. That piece is addressable. That bit's not addressable. And some of them are addressable in different ways. So some of them is addressable from a volume point of view, so do less. Others are from an efficiency point of view, so do it better. And others are just from an overall point of view, just don't do it. And so I would say that they have an appreciation for the total cost, but not actually how they can dig that out to understand what's addressable. And the challenge is that what is addressable changes. So what's addressable now was not addressable even 2 years ago, let alone 5 years ago.
So just quickly on that point, what's an example of something in your experience, without mentioning a company, something that's been addressable that they could deal with straight away, like quick wins?
Yeah, sure. So, previously the default reaction to lots of things is speak to a call center agent and then send a tech because they can't resolve it on that phone call. But now that's not the default option. The thing is then is like, well, hang on a minute. How can we actually interact with that customer live in a real-time way to actually understand what's really happening? Can that issue be resolved without sending a truck? Because that technology is there now. One of the good things that came from COVID is we're all used to video type of interaction, and we're quite comfortable with that. Even with my grandparents, same thing, right? That you're used to dealing with them in that way and working with them in that way. It was really good, and so that is now permeated the whole way through the industry, and that's available. It wasn't a few years ago. And so that unlocks more of that benefit, unlocks that cost, and makes what was once an unaddressable cost and just a cost of doing business to something that's now addressable.
Okay, so that's a nice segue to my next question on the list about remote visual support, which is a technology that Donnabrook has. But can you tell us more about remote visual guidance and how that can improve operational efficiency?
Sure. So, in that example I just said then around a call center agent, and it could be a call center agent or it could actually be a technician speaking to another technician in the field. The hardest thing is words can only tell you so much. Photos can tell you more, but video and sound tells you everything. And so if you can actually see what the customer is seeing, understand what they're grappling with, you're more likely to be able to solve the problem that they're dealing with. And that could be just exactly the same as if it's a junior technician in the field and they're speaking to their boss, they're speaking to their supervisor. If they can actually see what each other's doing and interact and collaborate, then they can solve that problem. And that's really where that comes into its own. Because if you think about those situations there, if we can make it so that way, an NBN is a great example. If in an NBN situation, which whoever your ISP is, if you're able to speak to that customer's care team and they can see the router that you're working with, they can see the connections, they can see what it might be, how it might be in some dusty cupboard somewhere, or it might be in the middle of the floor or on a wall. All of those things change what's needed. And so then they can either help you resolve it, or if they need to send someone to that equation I mentioned earlier, they're sending the right technician who has the right skills with the right parts and the right equipment to fix your issue.
Right. Otherwise,
so
that's a big thing. Right. Otherwise, it could be multiple trips. And for the consumer who's waiting for MBN to the home, for example, they could have to wait another 3 weeks and get in line.
All those sorts of things. And you could apply that to whether that's gas, electricity, water, your printer at work, the water leak in the hallway at the office, whatever it might be.
Yep. Okay. No, it sounds good. So I guess the next question is, if a company is hesitant to adopt remote visual support, what advice would you give? It could be an operational issue that they resist. They're too busy, or they can't get the contact center to utilize it because their metrics are to get rid of the call as quickly as possible.
So the first thing I'd say is start small. So pick a use case where you see that the actual direct benefit and engage those that engage in that process. I've never come across a situation where you're speaking to a call center rep or a technician and you speak, or a supervisor, and you talk them through the technology, show it to them. Immediately their eyes light up and go, oh, wow. Yeah, okay, I could do my job so much better if I had this. And then it's about understanding, what are the impediments that get in the way of that. And Andrew, you raised a great one. In a call center, many call centers are measured on average handle time.
Yeah.
They're not necessarily measured on first time resolution or repeat calls, those kinds of things. So if you measure it on average handle time, this might take the call a bit longer. But what happens is you avoid a truck roll. So if I'm measured on that resolution and no truck roll, then I'm incentivized to actually get that happening and get it done. And so I would say, and this is not a big scary technology that costs a lot of money either. It is a very affordable tool. And so putting in place a small scale trial is something that most organizations will be able to afford, and you will see those benefits immediately. You think of a truck roll that can cost anywhere between sort of 200 and 2,000, depending on how far you've got to go in Australia. Yeah, it doesn't take long for that business case to just pay for itself really quickly. So start small, pick the use case, and also work with those individual users to understand how they're going to use it on a day-to-day basis, and embed it in terms of part of what they do, and then remove those impediments, whether they be different metrics, different processes or systems, or whatever it might be, what's going to get in the way of that, because that end case in terms of that getting that benefit is a better customer outcome with lower cost service. And then I'll add to that, though, to my earlier point about the environmental side of things, all of that means less fuel's being used, less trucks are being rolled, and you can get a better handle on your environmental impact.
Yep, all good points. We want to keep this short and sharp. So, Danny, thank you for your time. A final question, I guess, to shed a little personal light. And a random question here is, tell us a little bit more about your first PC and how that came about, what it was.
So my first PC wasn't a PC, and it wasn't a Mac. It was an Amstrad. my dad went to buy a PC and got sold an Amstrad. Didn't understand the difference, and so we had that
I
at
don't.
home. So exactly right. So it had the same disc. You had the same 2-size floppy disks for all of those old enough to remember floppy disks. I basically used to play Boulder Dash. That was my favorite game back then. But yeah, it wasn't either of them. It was completely different, thanks to Mr. Sugar, and they're not around anymore.
So it's just like an old Stone Age gaming box, isn't it? Is that what it was?
Oh, it had word processing and all sorts of things, but it didn't
Right.
really run on DOS. It had its own operating system, similar to DOS, looks the same,
Right.
but it's different
Yeah.
commands. But it was the other branch of the computing world at the time. It wasn't an IBM PC and it wasn't an Apple Macintosh. It was an Amstrad. It was the
Very fun.
UK solution to personal computing.
There you go. Well, mine was a PC Junior, which is probably showing my age. Thanks again, Danny. I appreciate it. Danny from Structured Creative.